It's failing, Marcus said at once. Flat no-alarm eyes on the screen hand already moving toward the override. Julian Cross crossed the server room in 8 steps. He put his palm flat on the monitor and pushed it sideways off the rack. The crash was total. Glass and aluminum and 3 years of diagnostic data hitting the floor in one sharp final sound. Nothing in this room is failing, Julian said. Because nothing in this room belongs to you. He pointed at the door. Out. Marcus looked at the floor. He looked at the broken monitor. He looked at the USB drive already seated in his closed hand. The one Julian had not seen him palm, the one carrying 48 hours of intercepted routing data, the one that only needed one more open port. I need 30 more seconds.
Oh, hell no. He just handed a federal hacker the exact excuse he needed. Keep watching.
The glass door of the server room slammed open, hard. Julian Cross filled the frame. His rose gold smartwatch caught the blue LED light cold and sharp, a $15,000 gleam above a cheap polyester collar. Marcus Vance knelt beside the rack. His hands were steady, precise, unhurried. He was running a passive network scan. His diagnostic keyboard sat flat on the floor, connected to a port at the base of the tower. Julian saw it. His jaw tightened. He crossed the room. His custom Italian leather loafers clicked against the glass floor tiles, each step deliberate, each step slow. He stopped directly above Marcus. He didn't speak, not yet. He let the silence press down, first heavy, calculated, designed to shrink a man. Marcus did not look up. His fingers moved across the keys, quiet, methodical, unhurried. Julian's nostrils flared. He reached out. He grabbed the latte from the server rack shelf, the cup still steaming, still full. He tilted it, slowly, deliberately. The scalding liquid hit the keyboard in a single decisive pour. The sharp, sizzling crackle of short-circuiting electronics split the air. The bitter, burnt smell of espresso mixing with ozone filled the sterile room instantly. Marcus pulled his hands back. He did not flinch. He did not gasp. He looked at his ruined keyboard. He looked at the foam dripping from the keys. Then he looked up at Julian Cross. Julian smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was a smile that belonged to a man who had never once lost. Cable monkeys don't speak to executives, Julian said. His voice was smooth, unhurried, practiced. Now clean up this mess and get out of my server room before I have you blacklisted from the entire industry. Out in the open plan office, 3 junior developers had gone completely still. Sarah sat frozen at her standing desk. Leo's paper coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth, forgotten, crushed slightly in his grip. A third developer, closer to the glass wall, looked away. They all looked away. None of them spoke. Julian adjusted his watch. The rose gold case caught the light again, bright, deliberate, expensive. He glanced at it the way a man checks the time after signing a contract. Satisfied. Done. Marcus did not move. He did not reach for a rag. He did not wipe the coffee from his wrists. He did not lower his eyes. He stayed exactly where he was kneeling, still watching Julian's face with an expression so calm it belonged in a different room, a different building, a different world entirely. Julian blinked. Just once. Something passed behind his eyes. Something small and quick and immediately suppressed. He turned away first. "Get it cleaned up," he said. He did not look back. Marcus looked at the ruined keyboard. His thumb moved slow and quiet to the side of his frayed canvas bag. It pressed against something inside, something heavy, something metallic. His expression did not change, not once. Out in the open plan office, Sarah exhaled. Leo set his cup down. Neither of them said a word. They had both seen the look on the IT technician's face. Neither of them could name it. But it had not been fear. It had not been humiliation. It had been something older than both of those things, something patient, precise, and absolutely terrifyingly certain. Marcus pulled his hand from the bag. He reached for the ruined keyboard. He began to clean up the mess, calm, methodical, and completely silent. But to understand what was already moving behind those steady eyes, you have to rewind exactly 48 hours. The federal building had no windows on the lower floors. Cold, deliberate, sealed. Marcus Vance sat at a steel table, straight-backed, still. The room smelled of recycled air printer toner and something faintly metallic. A briefing officer stood at the far end of the table. His name was not offered. It was not relevant. He placed a single folder flat on the steel surface and slid it across without ceremony. Marcus opened it. He read it once. He closed it. Vanguard Tech, the briefing officer said. His voice was flat, precise, institutional. 48 hours, in and out. The merger audit begins the moment you're clear. Marcus said nothing. He turned the folder 90 degrees on the table. A small adjustment. Exact. The target is Julian Cross, the officer continued. CTO, 41, Harvard. 3 companies before this one, each sold at peak valuation, each leaving a trail of anomalies that nobody followed up on. He paused. We're following up. Marcus looked at the folder. He did not open it again. He already had it. Every name, every figure, every routing pattern already filed and cross-referenced behind his eyes. The officer placed a small object on the table beside the folder. A USB drive, silver dense, cold. Marcus picked it up between 2 fingers. He turned it once. It had no branding, no label, no markings of any kind. Just machined metal, smooth and heavy, the kind of weight that came from precision engineering and serious intent. That executes a total network freeze, the officer said. The moment it interfaces with a hostile server, full seizure protocol, no override, no recovery. Marcus set it back on the table. He looked at it for 3 seconds. He picked it up again and held it flat in his palm. The cold, dense, perfectly machined weight settled against his skin. The cover is Tier 1 maintenance, the officer said. He slid a plastic ID across the table. Marcus looked at it. The photo was his. The name was his. The title printed beneath it read in small, blunt capitals, Tier 1 maintenance. He picked up the ID. He turned it over. The back was plain scuffed, already deliberately aged. He set his federal credential wallet on the table beside it. The wallet was slim, dark, folded once. The gold seal on the inner badge caught the ceiling light for just a moment, precise, unmistakable, authoritative. Then he closed the wallet. He slid it across the table, back to the officer. He picked up the plastic ID instead. He held both objects for one moment, the silver USB in his right hand, the scuffed plastic card in his left. Cold weight in one hand, disposable plastic in the other. He pocketed both. The officer said, Julian Cross is running a shadow protocol inside the Vanguard server architecture. We believe he is siphoning funds ahead of the merger. Destination accounts offshore, untraceable by standard audit tools. He stopped. He looked at Marcus directly. We believe the transfer will complete within 48 hours of your arrival. Marcus stood. He lifted his frayed canvas bag from the floor beside his chair. He set it on the table. He opened it methodically, calm, deliberate, unhurried. Inside, a battered diagnostic keyboard, a set of cable tools, a worn multimeter, a coil of Ethernet patch cable, a faded polo shirt folded flat. Everything cheap, everything scuffed, everything exactly right. He placed the silver USB into a hidden interior pocket flat against the bag's inner wall, sealed beneath a strip of plain fabric. He pressed it once to confirm it was seated. He did not press it twice. He zipped the bag. He lifted it by the worn canvas strap. He looked at the briefing officer one final time. What exactly is he trying to hide? Marcus said. It was not a question. The officer understood that. That's what makes it interesting, the officer said. He's not just hiding the transfer. He's hiding the fact that the company was already hollow before the merger was announced. Marcus nodded once. He moved toward the door. He did not look back at the credential wallet on the table. He did not look back at his tailored jacket hanging on the chair behind him. He did not look back at any of it. He walked out as a federal cyber-auditor. He stepped into the elevator as a cable monkey. The doors closed quiet, final, absolute. And Marcus Vance, stripped of every visible marker of authority, carrying a bag full of cheap tools and one very specific piece of cold silver metal, rode down toward the ground floor with eyes that had already seen the entire building from the inside. He had the keys to the glass castle. He just didn't know yet that the king was already burning it down from the inside. Vanguard Tech's lobby was designed to intimidate. Glass steel light. Everything reflective, everything deliberate, everything saying the same thing in different materials. We are untouchable. Marcus walked through the front entrance at 7:43 in the morning. He wore the faded polo shirt. He carried the frayed canvas bag. The plastic Tier 1 ID hung from a plain lanyard against his chest. He did not look up at the atrium ceiling. He did not slow down for the lobby art. He moved the way. Maintenance workers move steady, invisible, purposeful in a way that reads as purposeless to anyone not paying attention. The security desk waved him through without eye contact. He took the service elevator. The open-plan floor was already running at full noise. Keyboards, low voices, the relentless icy rush of the server cooling fans pushing cold air through every vent in the ceiling. The sound was constant, mechanical, indifferent. It underscored everything. Marcus found a free workstation near the east wall close to the server room's secondary access panel. He sat down. He opened his bag. He plugged in his diagnostic tools with the calm efficiency of a man who had done this in 100 identical rooms. He was not here yet. Not officially. That was the point. Across the floor, Julian Cross stood at the glass partition that separated his corner office from the open-plan space. He was talking, or rather he was performing. His voice carried easily sharp, unhurried, designed to reach every desk without appearing to try. He held a crystal tumbler of imported sparkling water. The light caught it the way light catches expensive things, completely admiringly. He was looking at Leo. Leo was 26, maybe 27. He sat at a standing desk with a crushed paper coffee cup beside his keyboard. Generic brand. Cold. He had been there since before Marcus arrived. That much was clear from the dark circles and the particular stillness of a person running on their third consecutive sleepless night. "Run it again," Julian said. His voice did not rise. It didn't need to. "And this time, don't give me a file that looks like it was formatted by a first-year intern." Leo nodded. He did not speak. He turned back to his screen. Sarah sat 2 desks away. She kept her eyes forward, her jaw set, her hands moving steadily across her keyboard. She had learned not to react visibly. Marcus could see that. He could see it in the precise economy of her movements. Careful, controlled the body language of someone who had been managing a volatile environment for long enough to make the management invisible. Marcus ran a passive network scan. He kept his eyes on his own screen. The diagnostic tool moved quietly through the Vanguard architecture, floor by floor, node by node, reading traffic patterns the way a doctor reads a pulse. Elevated in one area, irregular in another, and then buried 3 layers beneath the primary server partition. Something else entirely, a shadow protocol, running parallel to the main network, drawing bandwidth in small irregular increments spaced just far enough apart to avoid triggering the standard anomaly threshold, designed to be missed. Marcus looked at it for 4 seconds. He did not move. He did not change his expression. He reached into his bag for a cable slow routine, exactly what a Tier 1 maintenance technician looks like when he reaches into his bag for a cable. His eyes stayed on the traffic pattern. The shadow protocol was not just active, it was progressing. The offshore routing architecture was already built, already tested, already waiting. It needed one final authorization sequence to execute the full transfer. $10 million moving in fragments, each fragment clean, each fragment routed through a different relay, each fragment arriving at the same destination by a different road. Julian knew what he was doing. Julian had done this before. Julian was doing it right now, today, this morning, while Leo ran the file again and Sarah kept her eyes forward and the server cooling fans pushed cold air through every vent, and nobody on the entire floor had any idea what was being stolen from underneath them. Marcus finished connecting the cable. He sat back. He looked at his screen with the neutral, faintly bored expression of a man performing routine maintenance. He noted the transfer's current completion percentage. He noted the projected finish time. He noted the gap between that finish time and the official merger audit window. The gap was not large. It was not comfortable. Julian's voice cut across the floor again. He had moved from the glass partition to the open plan space, now standing directly beside Leo's desk, looking at the screen over Leo's shoulder. "One wrong keystroke in my network," Julian said, quiet, almost gentle, "and you're erased." He said it the way people say things they mean twice, once as a professional warning, once as something older and colder than that. Leo nodded again. His hand was steady on the mouse. His paper coffee cup sat untouched beside the keyboard. Marcus watched this. He did not look directly at Julian. He did not look directly at Leo. He watched the reflection in the dark edge of his own monitor. He watched Julian straighten up, adjust his watch, and move back toward the glass partition with the easy, unhurried step of a man who owned every surface his feet touched. Marcus looked back at his diagnostic screen. The shadow protocol continued its quiet, incremental work. Patient, hidden, confident. Julian thought his digital tracks were covered. He had built the architecture, carefully run the tests, timed the execution, managed the witnesses. He had thought of everything. He had not thought of the man at the east wall workstation, sitting quietly with a frayed canvas bag and a plain plastic ID, reading his footprints one by one.
Wait, he's literally stealing millions and using his own overworked junior staff as a human shield. If that were me, I would have leaked his IP addresses to the dark web on day one. Imagine sitting in that glass office, thinking your money and title make you a god. Arrogance always leaves a digital trail.
The server room door required a level 3 key card. Marcus had one, not his own. A cloned signal written to a blank card during the passive scan pulled from the access log of a maintenance supervisor who had badged in at 6:15 that morning and not returned since. The clone took 11 seconds to write. Marcus palmed the card, stood, lifted his bag, and walked toward the server room with the unhurried stride of a man answering a routine ticket. Nobody looked up. The keycard touched the reader. The light went green. The door opened. He stepped inside. The server room was cold, deliberately, precisely, institutionally cold. The kind of cold that exists to protect machines, not people. The cooling fans ran at full speed, a constant layered roar that swallowed smaller sounds completely. Marcus moved along the rack line, reading labels, reading cable runs, reading the physical architecture the way he had already read the digital one. He found the shadow server on the third row. It was not labeled. That was its label. Every other unit in the room carried a rack tag, a port designation, a maintenance sticker with a date. This one had nothing. Clean, anonymous, intentional. Marcus set his bag down beside it. He opened the bag's slow routine, the movements of a technician performing scheduled work. He connected the diagnostic keyboard to the server's direct access port. His fingers moved across the keys, quiet, methodical, building the intercept sequence layer by layer. The offshore routing numbers began to surface. They came up in fragments, partial strings masked behind 2 layers of proprietary encryption. Marcus worked through the first layer in 4 minutes. The second layer took 6. The numbers came clear. He began to copy them segment by segment to his local drive. 17 routing strings, 14 destination accounts, 3 relay nodes, each registered to a shell entity in a different jurisdiction. He was on the 11th string when the firewall pinged. It was a small alert, discreet, the kind Julian Cross had configured to notify only one device. One rose gold smartwatch on one wrist in one corner office on the floor above. Marcus heard the change before he saw it. A shift in the building's ambient sound, subtle, directional. The particular rhythm of Italian leather loafers on a hard floor, moving fast, moving with the aggressive, purposeful tempo of a man who believed speed was dominance. The footsteps hit the corridor outside the server room. Hard, rapid, each one vibrating through the glass floor tiles, traveling up through the rack legs, arriving at Marcus's knees as a faint, insistent percussion. Marcus did not stop. He moved to the 12th routing string. His left hand found the keyboard shortcut without looking. 3 keys pressed together, clean and quiet. The data saved to the local drive. Hidden partition. Encrypted. Done. The server room door opened. Julian Cross walked in the way. Powerful men walk into rooms they own without pausing, without reading the space, without any of the small physical hesitations that signal uncertainty. He was already talking before the door had finished closing behind him. "What," Julian said, the word flat, sharp, bitten off at the end, "are you doing in here?" Marcus looked up. He did it slowly, the way a man looks up from work he is not finished with. "Cooling fan diagnostic," Marcus said. "Ticket came in at 9:40. Julian looked at the diagnostic keyboard. He looked at the server it was connected to. His expression did not change, but something behind his eyes did. Fast, specific. The look of a man who has just identified a problem and is already 3 steps into solving it. "That rack," Julian said, "is not on any maintenance schedule." "Fan noise variance on the 3rd row," Marcus said. "Standard check." Julian stared at him. His pristine Italian leather loafers stood 6 inches from Marcus's scuffed rubber-soled work boots. The contrast was total, absolute, deliberate on one side and irrelevant on the other. Julian's jaw moved once. He looked at the keyboard. He looked at the port it was connected to. He looked at Marcus's face, reading it the way a man reads a threat, searching for the thing that would tell him how much had been seen, how much was known, how much damage had already been done. Marcus's face gave him nothing. Julian reached out. He grabbed the diagnostic cable in one fist. He yanked it from the port in a single hard pull. The connection severed. The screen went dark. Julian held the cable. He looked at Marcus. He looked at the keyboard. He looked at Marcus again. His voice, when it came, was quiet, controlled, precise. "Pack your tools," Julian said, "and get off this floor." Marcus looked at the disconnected cable in Julian's hand. He looked at the dark screen. He looked at Julian's face with the same expression he had worn since the moment the man walked in. Steady, patient, and completely terrifyingly unreadable. He reached down. He began to pack his tools, slow, methodical, one item at a time. Julian watched every movement. He did not look away. He did not leave. He stood with the cable in his fist and his loafers on the glass floor and his smartwatch catching the cold LED light above them, and he watched the cable monkey pack his bag with the focused, hostile attention of a man who knows something is wrong and cannot yet prove what it is. Marcus zipped the bag. He straightened up. He met Julian's eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then he turned and walked toward the door. Julian was about to make a choice. He didn't know that yet. He thought he was managing a problem. He thought he was closing a gap. He thought he was looking at a low-level technician who had wandered too close to something he didn't understand. He was making the worst mistake of his professional life, and he was making it with total, absolute confidence. That was the thing about arrogance. It never announced itself as a mistake. It always felt like a decision. Julian followed him out. That was the first thing. He did not stay in the server room and let it end there. He followed Marcus through the door, into the corridor, and onto the open-plan floor, and the moment they crossed that threshold, everything changed in register. The floor was full, every desk occupied, every head down, every set of eyes carefully, deliberately directed at a screen, a keyboard, a coffee cup, anything that was not the corridor entrance. They all knew. The body language of the entire room said the same thing in the same language. "Don't be seen watching." Julian raised his voice, not to a shout. He didn't need to shout. He had spent years calibrating the precise volume that carried across an open-plan floor without technically being raised, the volume that reached every desk, every ear, every peripheral field of vision while maintaining the surface appearance of a private correction. "I want security up here," Julian said. He was looking at Marcus. He was not looking at his phone. He didn't need to. The call had already gone through the smartwatch at his wrist. One tap, silent, done. Now. Sarah's hand stopped on her keyboard. Just for a second. Just long enough to be human. Then they started again, steady, deliberate, staring at her screen with the focused intensity of someone trying to disappear into their work. Leo did not move at all. His paper coffee cup sat beside his keyboard, untouched, cold, forgotten. His eyes were on his monitor. His face was completely still. Marcus stood in the middle of the floor. He held his frayed canvas bag at his side. He did not move toward the elevator. He did not move away from Julian. He stood quiet, patient, occupying his own space with a stillness that had nothing defeated in it. Julian stepped closer. He reached out and took the canvas bag by the strap. He pulled. Marcus let him take it. He let it go without resistance, without reaction, without any of the small, involuntary physical responses that humiliation usually produces. Julian opened the bag. He looked inside. Tools, cables, a worn multimeter, a coil of patch cable, a faded polo shirt folded flat. He reached in. He pulled out the diagnostic keyboard by one corner, the keys still stained with dried coffee from the morning's first incident, and held it up. He looked at it. He dropped it. It hit the floor hard. The sound carried across the entire open-plan space. Every head stayed down. Julian looked at Marcus. His voice dropped. Lower now. Quieter. More precise. "You people think you can come into my building," Julian said. "Touch my equipment, access my systems, and walk away like nothing happened." He paused. He let it sit. "You're done. You're blacklisted. You're finished in this industry before you ever started." The elevator at the far end of the floor opened. Two security guards stepped out. They were large, uniformed tactical belts, heavy with equipment, authoritative in the specific physical way of men whose job is to make a situation end. They crossed the floor with purpose. They reached Marcus. One took his left elbow. One took his right. The grip was firm, practiced the grip of people who had done this before and expected resistance. Marcus did not resist. He stood exactly as he had been standing. His arms were held, his bag was on the floor, his keyboard was on the floor beside it, and the burning, sticky heat of the earlier latte had long since soaked through the fabric at his wrists and dried there stiff and dark against the cheap polyester. The guards began to move him toward the elevator. Julian watched. He had his crystal tumbler back in his hand, now sparkling water, cold, imported, expensive. He held it with the ease of a man who had already moved on from the current situation and was thinking about the next one. The floor was silent. Not the silence of people who were not paying attention. The silence of people paying very close attention and working very hard not to show it. Sarah's hands had stopped again. This time they did not start again. She sat with her fingers resting on her keyboard and her eyes on her screen and her jaw set in the particular way of a person absorbing something they cannot speak to and will not forget. Marcus took one step toward the elevator. One step with the guards. His right hand moved. It was a small movement, precise, unhurried. His fingers found the interior pocket of the canvas bag as the guard's grip shifted slightly at his elbow, a natural adjustment, a half-second of redistributed pressure. That half-second was enough. His fingers closed around the silver USB drive. He did not look down. He did not change his pace. He palmed it smooth, clean, silent, the cold, dense, perfectly machined weight of it pressing flat against his palm as the guard's grip re-established on his arm. He closed his hand. Julian Cross had just stripped him of his equipment, his access, his cover, and his dignity, publicly, deliberately, in front of every person on the floor. He had done it with a crystal tumbler in his hand and a smartwatch on his wrist and the total, unshakable confidence of a man who had never once in his professional life been wrong about who held the power in a room. He was about to find out what it felt like to be wrong about that. The silver drive pressed flat and cold and certain against Marcus's palm as the guards walked him toward the elevator. Julian thought he had unplugged the threat. He had not unplugged anything. The real weapon was already in Marcus's hand, and it had been there the whole time. The guards reached the elevator. One of them pressed the call button. The doors did not open yet. Marcus stopped. He did not step forward. He did not pull against the guards. He simply stopped moving, the way a very heavy object stops, completely without drama, without negotiation, with a finality that had nothing to do with physical resistance and everything to do with something else entirely. The guard on his left tightened his grip. Marcus looked at him, not with aggression, not with fear, with a quality of attention so precise and so calm that the guard's grip loosened slightly before the guard had consciously decided to loosen it. The second guard looked at the first, a small exchange, wordless, uncertain. Marcus turned. He turned back toward the floor, toward the server room, toward the full open-plan space where every head was still carefully down and every pair of hands was still carefully moving, and the relentless icy rush of the cooling fans was the only sound that didn't know it was supposed to be quiet. Julian stood at the center of the floor. He still had the crystal tumbler. I was watching Marcus with the narrow, focused attention of a man who had expected the situation to be over and was recalibrating. "We're done here," Julian said. His voice was controlled, measured, but there was something new in it, a fraction of a degree cooler than it had been. The specific temperature of a man who is no longer entirely sure. Marcus walked back across the floor. The guards moved with him for 2 steps. Then they stopped. They stopped because something in the way Marcus moved had changed the architecture of the situation without announcing the change, and their bodies understood it before their minds caught up. Marcus walked past Julian. He did not look at him. He walked to the server room door. He badged in. The light went green. He pushed the door open. Julian was moving before the door had fully opened. "Stop," Julian said, louder now. The control was still there, but it was working harder. "Stop right now. I will have you arrested. I will have you removed from this building by force. You do not have clearance for that room." Marcus walked to the third rack. He walked to the unlabeled server. He crouched down. His right hand opened. The silver USB drive sat flat in his palm. cold, dense machine to a tolerance that civilian hardware never required. He looked at the port. He looked at the drive. He seated it. Clean. Precise. One motion. The effect was not gradual. It was not a slow build. It happened the way a circuit completes instantly, totally without ambiguity. All 40 server cooling fans shut down simultaneously. The silence was not just the absence of sound. It was a presence. It filled the room the way pressure fills a sealed space, immediate, total, physical. Every person on the open plan floor felt it in their chest before they understood it with their minds. Julian felt it too. He was standing in the server room doorway. He had his hand raised, a gesture of authority, of command, of a man used to the world rearranging itself in response to his raised hand. The hand stayed raised, nothing rearranged. Marcus stood up. He reached to the collar of his faded polo shirt. He pulled it back. Against his collarbone on a flat steel chain hung the federal badge. The gold seal caught the cold server room light the way precious metal catches light, completely, without effort, without apology. It did not gleam the way Julian's smartwatch gleamed. The watch gleamed because it was designed to be noticed. The badge gleamed because it was what it was, and that was enough. Julian looked at it. He looked at it for a long time. His crystal tumbler was still in his hand. His Italian leather loafers were still on the glass floor. His smartwatch was still on his wrist. All of it was still there, every symbol, every marker, every material signal of dominance and authority and untouchable status. And none of it meant anything anymore. Not in this room, not in this moment, not standing in front of this man. Marcus Vance, Marcus said. His voice was quiet. It did not need to be anything else. Federal Cyber Command, Vanguard Tech is currently under active federal audit pursuant to Merger Review Protocol 7-4. Your network is frozen. Your transfer is suspended. Your offshore routing architecture has been logged, copied, and transmitted to the Federal Seizure Task Force. He paused. One beat. The USB currently seated in your shadow server is executing a full network freeze. There is no override. There is no recovery. Julian's mouth opened. Nothing came out. He tried again. His voice, when it arrived, was smaller than Marcus had heard it all day, smaller than it had been with Leo, smaller than it had been with Sarah, smaller than it had been with any of the practiced, calibrated performances of authority and contempt that had filled the last 48 hours. You can't, Julian said. You don't have the authority to. I have exactly that authority, Marcus said. I was not unkind about it. He was not triumphant about it. He stated it the way a technician states a fact, clean, simple, requiring no elaboration. Out on the floor, Sarah had turned in her chair. She was watching through the server room glass. Her hands were in her lap. Her expression was the expression of a person watching something they had stopped believing was possible, quietly, carefully, with the specific attention of someone who does not want to look away in case it stops being real. Leo was standing. He had pushed back from his desk without realizing he had done it. He was standing with his cold paper coffee cup forgotten in his hand, watching the cable monkey bypass Julian's biometric server locks with the calm, practiced efficiency of someone for whom biometric locks were a minor administrative detail. Julian looked at the USB drive seated in his server. He looked at the badge against Marcus's collarbone. He looked at his own watch, the rose gold case, the $15,000 movement. The symbol he had worn into every room for 3 years as proof of what he was and what others were not. His hand dropped. The crystal tumbler dropped with it. It didn't shatter. It hit the glass floor and rolled, spinning slowly, leaking the last of the sparkling water across the tiles in a thin, quiet, spreading line. Julian Cross looked at Marcus Vance. He looked at him the way a man looks at the moment his entire architecture of certainty collapses, not with anger, not yet, but with the specific, terrible expression of someone who has just understood fully and completely, and without any remaining possibility of denial, that they have made a catastrophic mistake. His empire was frozen, the override was active, the transfer was suspended, and the real destruction hadn't even loaded yet. The elevator opened. Not the one Marcus had almost been pushed into, the other one, the wide one. The service elevator at the far end of the floor that nobody had used all morning. It opened and 4 people stepped out. They wore plain dark jackets. They carried credentials not held up for display, not announced, simply present, clipped and visible, the quiet authority of people who did not need to perform what they were. FBI Cyber Division. They moved across the floor with the particular economy of people who had done this specific thing before and expected it to take exactly as long as it took. The open plan floor did not pretend anymore. Every head came up. Every pair of eyes tracked the four agents crossing toward the server room. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the absence of the cooling fans, that total pressurized silence, and the clean, deliberate footsteps of four federal agents walking toward a man who had run out of options 48 hours ago and hadn't known it. Julian Cross was still in the server room doorway. He had not moved. His dropped tumbler was still rolling its slow, diminishing spiral on the glass floor. His hand was still at his side. His watch was still on his wrist. He looked at the agents. He looked at Marcus. He looked at the USB drive seated in his server. He looked like a man standing at the exact center of the thing he had spent 3 years building, watching it become something else entirely. The lead agent stopped in front of Julian. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "Julian Cross," she said, "you are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement of corporate funds, and obstruction of a federal merger audit." She said it the way people say things that are already decided, without heat, without drama, without any of the performance that the situation might have seemed to call for. Behind her, on the giant overhead monitors that lined the upper wall of the open plan floor, the screens changed. All of them. Simultaneously. The Vanguard Tech dashboards, the project management interfaces, the internal communication feeds, all of it replaced in a single clean transition by 2 words in large plain type. Federal seizure. Julian looked up at the screens. He looked at all of them. Every monitor, every surface. His company, his building, his architecture reflected back at him in 2 words. Julian's offshore transfer had been running at 91% completion when the USB seeded. It stopped at 91%. It did not complete. The $10 million sat suspended in the relay network, frozen mid-transit, visible to the task force, traceable to every account, every shell entity, every jurisdiction. All 14 destination accounts locked. All 3 relay nodes flagged. All 17 routing strings logged, documented, transmitted. 3 years of work, frozen at 91%. The lead agent produced handcuffs. The sound they made when they closed was sharp, cold, metallic. A clean, precise click that bounced off the pristine glass walls and traveled across the silent floor and reached every desk and every person sitting at every desk with perfect, unambiguous clarity. Julian's access card was taken. His phone was taken. His custom Italian leather loafers carried him for the last time across the floor he had owned. And then his watch. The lead agent reached for it personally. She unclasped it from his wrist with the efficient, practiced motion of someone performing a documented procedure. She held it for a moment. Rose gold case. $15,000 movement. Purchased the asset records would later confirm with funds drawn from the first transfer 18 months ago, before Julian had fully committed to the architecture, back when he was still testing what he could take and whether anyone would notice. She placed it in an evidence bag. She sealed it. She labeled it. Julian watched his watch disappear into a clear plastic bag and understood in that moment with the specific, terrible clarity of a man who had built his identity around objects that the object was gone and the identity had gone with it. The agents walked him to the elevator. His loafers clicked against the glass floor tiles one final time. Regular diminishing ending. The floor watched. Sarah watched. She had not sat back down. She stood beside her desk with her hands at her sides and her eyes tracking Julian Cross all the way to the elevator with an expression that was not triumph and was not pity and was not anything that needed a name. It was the expression of a person who had absorbed something for a very long time and was now watching it end. Leo stood beside her. His paper coffee cup was still in his hand. He had been holding it since this started. He looked at it. He set it down. He did not pick it up again. Marcus walked to the center of the floor. He stood where Julian had stood. He looked at Sarah. He looked at Leo. He said 2 things. He said them quietly, without ceremony, without the performance of a moment. The first thing he said was practical, structural. a directive that had been pre-authorized as part of the federal audit's corrective action protocol, reviewed and approved before Marcus had ever walked through the front entrance wearing a plain plastic ID. Sarah's salary and Leo's salary adjusted to market rate, effective immediately, backdated 3 months to the date of their last formal performance reviews in which both had been rated exceptional and neither had been compensated accordingly. Sarah looked at him. She did not speak immediately. When she did, she said, "He told us the budget didn't allow for it." "The budget," Marcus said, "had $10 million in it this morning." Leo made a sound. It was not quite a laugh. It was the sound of a person releasing something they had been holding for a long time without realizing how long they had been holding it. Marcus picked up his frayed canvas bag from the floor where Julian had dropped it. He picked up his coffee-stained diagnostic keyboard. He placed the keyboard in the bag. He zipped it. He lifted it by the worn canvas strap. He walked to the elevator. The doors opened. He stepped in. He turned. The floor was behind him. The silent overhead monitors with their 2 plain words, the empty space where Julian Cross had stood, Sarah and Leo at their desks, the whole open-plan architecture of a company that was still standing and now had the unusual distinction of being cleaner than it had been when the day started. The elevator doors began to close. Julian Cross was already in the other elevator, already descending. His loafers on the floor of a federal transport, his watch in a plastic evidence bag, his empire frozen at 91%. The doors were almost closed. Marcus looked at the floor one last time. "Cable monkeys don't speak," Marcus said quietly as the last inch of the open-plan floor disappeared behind the closing doors. "They just rewrite the code."
Crushing satisfaction of watching arrogance dig its own grave. That's what justice feels like. If you were in Marcus's shoes, would you have stayed completely silent while he poured that coffee? Or would you have flashed your federal badge the second he raised his voice? Drop your truth in the comments, because there's no right answer. If this surgical takedown gave you chills, share it with someone who needs to see the underdog win, and subscribe for more stories where the invisible get the ultimate last word.